What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Cheeky MidWeeky, where we are making strength and conditioning not boring. And today's episode will not be boring at all, especially if you like nutrition, because you can't outwork a bad diet. The man right here, Pratik Patel, we'll talk about that. You've been to Rose Bowls in the NFL. I'm gonna let you do your intro. I'm gonna stop talking. Pratik, thank you for joining the show, man. I really appreciate it.
No, thanks for having me. I guess the second time around. Before it was
Mm-hmm.
grilling me. I was trying to make sense of his weird accent. But no, very fortunate to have the chance to work in team sport, a few different colleges, K-State, Michigan State, Oregon, and then most recent stop was with the New York Giants. I was working with Aaron Rodgers on his strength and conditioning staff, but also in charge of all the, nutrition, supplementation, hydration, some of the assessments we were doing on the players, took over the blood biomarker program, started doing a lot more sleep education, stress, HRV, really trying to just fill in the gaps that weren't necessarily provided. And I think it's funny, a lot of teams will just be like, oh, we have somebody for that. We have a sleep consultant. We have this. I'm like, the players don't know anything about it. How can you say you have this fucking box check when you really don't? And it annoyed the crap out of me because again, to my idiotic dismay, it's like, well, if nobody else is going to do it, I'm going to do it. I've made a career doing that.
Mm.
It's good and bad. It's good because you can leverage it if people recognize what you're doing. It's bad if people don't understand it or don't even care, and you're just doing all this extra work that may or may not be providing value to the athletes, which is the most important thing. And it's not putting any more money in your bank account, and you're just busting your ass, wasting your time. So I had a really great experience there. We learned a lot. We did as much as we could, and mainly the goal was to have the team physically and mentally ready to play on Sundays. So whether that was reducing games lost to injury, whether that was, again, complementing the way the coaches wanted to train in terms of practices run, just making sure that we weren't our own worst enemy. If there were things that we knew about players that we can prevent them or educate them on to help them get to that stage with being available, then that's what we wanted to do. And I think we were successful in, getting it. The big thing was reducing games lost to injury. And it's not reducing injuries, because when you're talking about football, you can't stop injury in football. And in the NFL, you have to disclose everything. It's not like college. So if a player has to go do dental work and they don't practice, they're on the injury report.
Mm.
If a player wakes up, yawns and stretches and gets into this, massive extension and strains their sternocleidomastoid, which has happened, and obviously they can't move their neck, so yeah, you're not going to put a player out there, and it's acute. They're going to fix themselves in a couple days. You put them on the injury report, and that's where fans and other people sometimes go a little bit crazy about, why do they have so many injuries? Why is the report like that? I'm like, you look at the report on Wednesday, Thursday, and then you look at the report on Sunday and the inactives, and you tell me, is that the end all be all? So no. So again, I really, really enjoyed working with Aaron. He challenged me to get outside of my comfort zone in terms of what I had experienced and how I approach and think of things. So it wasn't like he was a direct mentor or anything. That's not his job. They, like Coach McAdoo, Aaron, Ronnie Barnes, they hired me to do something because I was the person they felt was going to take that role and fulfill it properly. And I had to do all the growth on my own. And fortunately, I had a chance to work with him, which was great. Unfortunately, we sucked. This is the crazy thing. In 2016 was Coach McAdoo's first year. They went to the playoffs.
Mm.
So Jerry Reese, the GM, knew that the defense was lacking. They spent $100 million fixing the defense. You get Snacks Harrison, awesome run stuffer. You get Olivier Vernon from Miami, pass rushing, outside linebacker / D end. You signed, Janoris Jenkins. The year before you had DRC. So the defense was solid. The offense was struggling a little bit. Eli played a hell of a game in their wild card game, but they lost pretty badly to the Packers. 2017 comes around. Okay, defense is still good. Let's get some free agents in. Let's bolster the offense. Draft Evan Ingram, first round, fast tight end out of Ole Miss. Sign Brandon Marshall, another receiver. We already have Odell. It's like, okay, yeah, things are gonna look up. It does not happen that way. Unfortunately, the media says, hey, this defense can get you to the Super Bowl. The Giants should make the playoffs. We were 0-6 heading into Denver. And our first win that year was at Denver, which is really funny because I just saw a clip of Garrett Bowles, who was on that team. because they just lost to Miami 70-0 yesterday,
Yeah.
which to me is unfathomable. Like you score 70 points in an NFL game. I think there were weeks like 3 or 4 years when I worked for the Giants, in like 4 or 5 games combined, we didn't score 70 points total. You scored in one game and there's still 8 minutes left in the fourth quarter. I'm like, oh my God. Good for them. I think these young coaches, which understand the game but want to do it their way, who say, fuck tradition, fuck what everybody else is doing, because everybody else is losing. They're losing their jobs. They're not growing. They're not, achieving success with or without good rosters. So my time in New York was great. Like I really enjoyed it, but it gets to a point where I saw the writing on the wall where it's like, no one's going to hire me as a head strength coach. And that was something Aaron and I talked about. He's like, I'm not hiring you for that to be the potential. I'm like, that's not why I wanted to come here. My growth in the organization is pretty much capped. Not like I wanted to be Aaron's boss or anything like that. It's like, as long as he's there, I'm still riding this wave of feeling very comfortable with what we're doing. We had a lot of buy-in from the players. They'll tell you that. It was very intentional. It was very smart. It was obviously still a million things we could have done better. And that's any situation. But then 2020 comes around. I think we're all going to get fired. Ronnie and the GM and all of us, they want to retain us. So Joe Judge retains us. I'm like, okay, well, how is this going to go? Because he's already dictating to Aaron, what conditioning should look like, how preparation should be, movements in the weight room, and he's changing my job description. And then Aaron leaves for a very great role, which I was very supportive of. I'm like, you got to take care of your family, man. Who knows what's going to happen in this league? There's no loyalty in the NFL, even though we're putting that foot forward from our end. And then I got transitioned to a different role. I'm like, this is awful. Like I have no control over my career, my future, my life. I'm under contract. I didn't sign my extension. I can't go to another team. You can't back channel that stuff because I'm under contract. The only way I could get out is I had to leave. And I ended up doing that.
That's fucking impressive. Like to actually see the writing on the wall and to do it that way, because not a lot of people would just kind of piss and moan about it, no? Quick break from the show to remind you to hit that like and subscribe button. It helps us out and it helps you be notified when we have new content get released. So again, please hit that like and subscribe button if you enjoy this content. And with that, let's get back to the show.
Oh yeah. I mean, you know how it is. Circles with coaches, it's always everybody else's fault. It's never their fault. Only if I had this opportunity or this chance, or if I worked for this person, or if I had this budget, if I had this weight room, if I had, whatever. And it's not just, being very self-aware about you and your situation. Like me, like I'm the reason I was in this position. Nobody forced me to take any of these jobs or work these hours. And now I'm like, is this what I want to do until I potentially get fired? Or, I'm 50 alone, no family. Living in a house in Jersey or wherever by myself. So I was like, I think there might be a way I can transition out just to test the waters to see what life is like out there. I didn't really have a plan in place. So I will tell people I'm better off for making that decision, but not having a plan in place and thinking that everything would fall in line for me immediately, because it kind of did during my career, was very naive of me, because I'm like, the hardest years of my entire life happened after I left the league, not those tough years working in the league or working insane hours in college. Like honestly, that shit's a breeze. But it has made me a better it has made me a better person and a better man. So what is your piece of advice for anybody that is transitioning? Because, more and more people are kind of talking about that, because you talked about it at first, like, hey, that I'll do it mentality is something that all strength coaches have embedded in their head. How can you keep that team player aspect, but still respect certain boundaries as you're, even in team sport, but then transitioning to the private sector world or even in the tactical world? Like that's a complete paradigm shift, isn't it? Yeah, I think so. It was a little bit of a shock to me at first, because when you transition from this big machine that has a lot of things already in place, you have budgets in place, you have access to doctors, you have, medical staff with you, you have a facility, you have the athlete management systems and the software. Now, you can't do as much as you would like to, so people that talk about the progressiveness of professional sport or this team or that team, teams aren't doing shit. I can do more than any team could ever do on my own, easily. And I have. And I think that's one of the unique things about going from this very confined atmosphere where you're bound by NCAA regulations or CBAs to now you can do any and everything you want. You know, if you want to specify or take over a specific niche, you want to be the full health practitioner of whoever, you know, athletes or non-athletes, you can do that. So I didn't have systems in place. And my naivety with that was I would figure it out. I don't need to hire a coach. I don't need to ask people for help. And that's just me being stubborn, having had figured things out for a very long time myself, not knowing that when you're on your own, you need as much help as possible, because the people that don't ask for help or try to figure it out using other people's, you know, recommendations, their guidelines, the things that they've done to make them successful, it becomes very, very hard. So like the first go around I did in 2021, you know, I was doing online coaching, you know, looking at all the different parameters, everything, but I didn't have my systems in place. I didn't have, you know, these principles and these methodologies that other coaches and health coach practitioners have done and have taught. As I said, fuck it, I'll try to figure it out myself. And that made things a lot harder for me. Leveraging social media, you know, really building a business from the ground up. Anybody can do it, but there are ways to do it that can be quick and easy and help you become successful. There are ways to do it that you just be spinning your wheels for years, you know, trying to make 5K a month, you know, 10K a month. So I think that's very unique, where I had to get out of my own head and realize, like, okay, the way that I was operating in the league, in college, has to be completely different. Now, the principles and everything that you know, the way I educate, how I think about training, and the way that I approach assessments with clients or athletes outside of that scope is very similar, but I need systems in place. Like, how am I going to be communicating to them? Is it via email? Do I create an app? Do I use a software? What assessments am I going to do? What kind of testing am I going to do? Am I going to leverage relationships with companies? Am I going to create like a partners list? Now that I don't have to use, you know, these specific, I don't have to use Gatorade and all that, that's thrown your throat from the league. So that's what took me a little bit of time to figure out. So I failed at first, but I went back to the drawing board, talked to a lot of other coaches, hired a coaching collaborative group to be like, okay, this is what you need to do. Niche down, specify who you are, you know, what makes you different, and what is it that you're going to bring to them? What's your offer? How do you position yourself? Where do you find leverage? And all that I'd been able to do just posting on social media since I had left the league, you know, because I had nothing else to do too while I was trying to figure out what I'm going to do for work.
You talked about it with the blood bio markers, and we talked off air about it briefly, but there's this growing fad out there in the world of anti-aging and people doing blood bio testing to see, you know, what their biological age is. For any of our listeners out there that might be like, hey, I've got athletes asking about this, I don't understand it, or there's too much information out there to know what to believe. Kind of explain it to people so that way they can understand it more and they can better serve their athletes or their clients from like a 10,000 foot view.
Yeah, one of the things that I did and was in charge of when I was with the Giants was we have a really great. They have a really great relationship with Quest.
You're still institutionalized, just like me.
I know. So Quest Diagnostics is a big sponsor for the Giants. It's what's their training facility is called, Quest Diagnostics Training Center. So Quest had come up with this great blood panel called Blueprint for Athlete, where they wanted to have it available for professional teams, but they wanted to bring it to the masses. So for your everyday athlete, your weekend warrior, where it's really important, and I'm a big proponent of this, looking at health is a very broad spectrum. So it's not just the ability to be strong, be fit. You know, fitness is great, but fitness is a component of health. You have athletes that can handle the physical demands day in and day out, but the systems inside, if they're working harmoniously, you can adapt to stress, you can handle different things and bring yourself back up to baseline or gain adaptation without a lot of issues. Those athletes are healthy, but having done thousands of blood draws on all these athletes over the years, you now start seeing these athletes are not healthy. You know, you see glucose control issues, you see inflammatory markers, you see dysregulation with micronutrients, you see, you know, gut microbiome dysbiosis, and all of these things acutely are not necessarily an issue. But when you have unhealthy athletes with poor lifestyle habits, that are eating, drinking, licking, eating, whatever under the sun, staying out late, they're not getting good quality sleep. They have had these behaviors since college, potentially before college, and or, they've played a violent-based collision sport for a very long time. Like they're gonna get hurt or injured. And for me, it was okay, what can we do to help them at least not only feel better, but just build a little bit more robustness from the inside, while also putting them through the paces from a strength and conditioning perspective, and crafting the recovery recommendations to just help them feel better than they ever have. We can't do a lot about the mental aspect of it. We can't do anything about the motivational aspect. As strength coaches like to put that into play. Like you can write shit all over the wall and clap all you want, but it's not going to do anything. Like in 2017, after week one, legitimately, I talked to a few defensive players, and they're like, "Yeah, we saw the writing on the wall, and we don't think the season's going to go very well." And some of them are like, "Yeah, we think about preserving ourselves and kind of just checking out."
Taking a quick break from the show to talk to you guys about our sponsor, TeamBuildr. If you have any online training platform needs, TeamBuildr is the go-to place. TeamBuildr has the ability to integrate with velocity-based training tools. They have the ability to program and have notes and videos for all of your athletes and your clients. This is your number one stop shop. Been using it since 2019 when I was working at Towson. So I've used it, love it. Make sure you check it out. Go ahead, click the link down in the description. And with that, let's get back to the show.
And I'm like, holy shit, no wonder we did so poorly. Amongst a lot of other things, that was the year about the kneeling and all that other stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so like looking internally, like your blood biomarkers, is just more so like, what is your health status right now? It's not this is your health status forever, but do you have dyslipidemia? Do you have issues controlling glucose? Do you have excessive amount of inflammation? Because if that's the case, you're now throwing more and more napalm on a fire while you're already being thrown to the wolves from a training load perspective, or you come into training camp or off-season training ill-prepared, overweight, you haven't touched a weight, like, the Aaron Rodgers thing. Like this dude was hiding out in dark caves and figuring out where he's going to play next, probably wasn't training at all, probably didn't do a sprint, a calf raise, whatever, and now everybody wants to blame the issue on the training staff of the Jets. It's like they can't regress everybody. The minimum expectation is this guy's a professional, has multiple MVPs, won a Super Bowl. He knows what he should be doing in the offseason. Oh, he gets the calf injury. Ah, shit. We know where this leads. Kevin Durant went through it a long time ago in the finals. Now, he barely played in the preseason, looked a little bit uncomfortable, and now he's expected to full on out, 100 miles out of the gate, be Aaron Rodgers when his body's just not ready for it. Oh, it's turf's fault. I'm like, yeah, it's turf's fault. A million other things that come into play, but let's blame the fucking surface. Same thing, like Joe Burrow has got a calf injury. Like when you wear cleats, that puts a significant amount of more stress on the calf. Obviously, during the week, he's probably not taking tons of reps, so it's going to take time. So I'm hoping for his sake, because he's a really good quarterback. Not that I like the Bengals or anything. I like their DC because I worked with him in 18. He was the cornerbacks coach for the Giants. Really good dude, Lou. But he needs to rest. Otherwise, something bad might happen. You never know. So again, looking at things internally is really, really important, and not necessarily everybody has to take an anti-aging test. It goes back and forth with the validity of looking at specific biomarkers and how does it correlate to really actually telling what your biological age is or your metabolic age. And they'll look at things like iron and ferritin, vitamin D, glucose control, things that come in like a CBC or Chem10, testosterone, lipids for sure. Now, these things are definitely important, but it doesn't tell the full story. So I took one of those through the Inside Tracker just because they reached out to me and wanted me to be one of like their professional people. So I was like, all right, if I can do it for free, I'll do it.
They wanted you to do a test so they could see your results?
Yeah, I did their advanced panel. I never posted about it on social media. I meant to. I took one last August, and I've done another extensive one through another company just this August. And then I did their inner age. So I was 37 at the time, and it said my inner age was 31 based on, the blood markers I get. I'm like, oh, well, this Brian Johnson guy who he's doing any and everything, and he's doing the craziest things, and he's only like 9 years younger than what he is. I'm like, dude, I'm doing what I've been doing forever, and I'm already 7 years younger. 6 years, whatever. And that was at the time where I had sustained an injury too, so it wasn't even training. I was eating a shitload of barbecue here. So it probably would have been a lot better too, but I'm a big proponent because what we were able to do, getting that data from the players and just me going to them and just asking questions, because without that, you don't know what questions to ask about, okay, what are your habits like at home? What are you doing? Like, why is your insulin levels elevated first thing in the morning? Yeah, vitamin D's low. We kind of get that. We know that that's pretty prevalent, but why are these specific inflammatory markers constantly elevated? Why do you have glucose control issues? Like you have an A1C above 5.8. That's crazy because you're a lean football player. Oh, I'm just stressing out because I got stuff going on. There's whatever baby mama drama or my mom's sick. And, that opens the door to ask questions about what's going on and what can we do to support them and keep them, at least healthy, to provide them with either the resources or education, and more importantly, the know-how and why, and then bring in all the other studies that have been done. Like, okay, you have dyslipidemia, you might have altered tendon and structure, tendon and ligament structure and function. If you have glucose control issues, you might have, increased incidence of soft tissue injuries or whatever. Like all these different things. Like this person's more predisposed to being having higher risk for fracture, whatever. It's like, okay, all this stuff is starting to make a lot more sense. Now, we can't fix everything for everybody, but if there are things within some of these major biomarkers that we're getting, and we know that when they're not within normal limits, we should at least address them, then if they can provide some level of assurance or assistance or help the athlete feel better, a little bit more recovered, less sore, then that's a win in our book. And as opposed to not doing any of the testings. There are some teams that don't really do anything, or they just do very surface level tests. They won't dive deeper. And the people that they have in-house, they're just not taking the information and actually trying to be very actionable about it. It's the same song and dance with sports science, every team, college and pro. It's like we're taking all this data, but we're not doing anything about it. And then the players get annoyed. Like, why do I got to do this? Why do I got to do this? You guys are just hiding the information. You're going to use it against me instead of, hey, this is what your results are. You do the test. I'm going to come directly to you. We're going to go through everything, and I'm going to give you an explanation of what it means and what I think we can do for you.
And that it's interesting you bring that up, because hearing you talk about that made me think like, okay, if there are all those lower barriers of you're not even eating salads, you're not eating vegetables, you're not sleeping, you're stressed out, you're not going to go right to supplementation, or would you? Like, what would you, fucking stud in this field in nutrition, what would you go to? Would you worry about those first things, or would you supplement while they're working towards those?
Yeah, I would do a combination of both because, we already know that if there are things that are difficult to get in the diet through food, and it shows up not only on blood work individually, but we kind of know it overall across populations, then just telling them like, hey, food first or food only, like that's not realistic.
And that was going to go in one ear and out the other, like, oh, he's not listening to me.
Yeah, so I would always do that. It's like, look, I'm going to give you two options. Like, we can address low vitamin D through supplementation because it's really the only way, especially, the darker skin you have, less time you spend outdoors. When it gets closer to fall and winter, you're not going to have the sunlight exposure to actually move the needle on that. So yeah, most of the athletes that, were below 30, my goal is to get every single one of them above 30. We'd have guys coming in like with low teens, like can never even move the needle on that. And I'm like, okay, do you have a history of soft tissue injury? Like, what's going on? Are you always in pain? Do you have trouble with weight management? I'm like, okay, it's not, low vitamin D isn't the reason, but it's a central piece, a part of the equation. So I'd always come up with like, hey, these are the markers not within normal limits. These are the potential reasons why. This is how we can address it. Supplementation, lifestyle, nutrition choices, and then open the floor to them. Like, I want to get your thoughts on what you're thinking, because it seems like a lot, and I don't want to overload you. These are the most important ones that I think you definitely should address, and then these are the secondary ones too.
How receptive are and like the ability to help influence that change? Because some of our members might be like, hey man, he's speaking to me, but like, what has been your best way to form those relationships and make it kind of seamless within the college world and then outside of it? Because we have people that do both.
Yeah, so the most important thing was to always have a good dialogue. And the thing with the players that I worked with is we only had a small handful of players, and I'm talking about the league, that stayed on the roster because there's so much roster turnover. Like when you turn over,
That's a good point. I didn't even think about that.
you have a minimal amount of time. Now, we were luckier because more athletes at that level are receptive to listening to what you have to say because they know that if they're a fringe player, they're trying to make the 53 or whatever the roster count is now, they'll do any and everything. And a lot of players love the idea of supplements. Now, some have no desire to take a supplement, but they're more few and far between. But some are like, hey, just tell me what to take. Like, is this going to help me? Yeah, no, is this going to help me? Is this going to, make me feel better, recover faster? To an extent, you're just like, yeah. But the tough thing is you're never going to get anything that we could provide legally that's automatically going to make them feel like $1,000,000. And that's the tough thing about nutrition, certain aspects of recovery. It's not like, hey, we had a badass lift. I feel really good. I'm pumped. Or, hey, my ankle was hurting. I went to the trainers. They did treatment on me. Oh, it was hurting and I feel so much better. But when you tell them to like, hey, here's your carbohydrate periodization for the week, or, I need you to eat more broccoli because you have excessive amount of oxidative stress. You don't detoxify very well. You need to take this vitamin D because your level is 11 and it's absurdly low. I would rather you be at 50, but let's try to get you to 30 over the course of 8 to 12 weeks. They're not going to feel that benefit. They're not going to automatically like, oh, I take creatine or I take fish oil, now I feel amazing. It's like, that's the tough thing about getting that buy-in, because over time they can potentially see the benefit, but they have to be consistent with it. And athletes are notoriously inconsistent with almost everything that they do. So part of it was definitely having the support of the organization to where everybody knew. Like, I was in front of the players presenting on certain things, whether it was the rookies or at certain times of the year, about things that were really important that the coaches resonated with. The head coach was like, okay, I'm going to give you 2 minutes. By 2 minutes, I'm going to give you 90 seconds to address it. And then the players can come talk to you after that. Because there's not a lot of time during the day. And I don't want to take up time just to hear myself talk. But if there's something that they need to know, like, are we going cross time zones? Are we going from hot to cold or cold to hot? Are we going to altitude? Stuff like that. Like, these players don't think about these things, but I'm thinking about all these other stressors that are going to impact them, that if we don't address it, we're already going to start the game like behind the 8 ball. So having the organization support was really important. Having the head coaches and Aaron and all that just point all the athletes directly to me, saying like, this is the guy you need to talk to. He's going to do you right. He's not like anybody else that you've come across in college or pro. But then also just being there day to day. They see me everywhere, in the locker room, in the weight room. I'm coaching them up. I'm on the field. I'm putting them through the motions, whatever my task is. Am I seeing the quarterbacks today or the running backs or whoever my group is? They're my group. Developing the relationships. Like, again, I'm a very soft-spoken person, but when I coach, I'm not super loud. I'm not clapping. I'm like, hey, I'm going to tell you something with intention. You're going to fucking listen to me. And that's the thing, like, players got to like, okay, well, this dude is not, wider than he is tall. He's never going to win the lifting competition, but shit, he's lean, he's smart, he knows what he's talking about. He's probably here for a reason. So once they have that perception of you and you deliver on it, then it's like, okay, this is cake. I don't have to prove myself to anybody, because now the organization knows who I am. The players know who I am. They know exactly what I can bring to the table and hopefully help them do within the confines of what we were able to do. But being around them, developing those relationships, them getting to see the personality, to know that, again, very calm, never like one of those annoying ass fucking coaches that's always in their face, understanding what they go through. I'm a minority in this country, obviously one that most people don't think about but yeah, life has not been peaches and cream for myself. Everybody goes through adversity, deals with some shit. Everybody has a backstory. Liking a lot of the things that they happen to like too. Like what? I like shoes. I like, designer stuff. I like cars. I like going out. Back then, I like going out and partying. Now I don't really care about that anymore. Listening to the same music, all that stuff. Like, that wasn't me trying to fit in. Like, this has been me since I was fucking 8, 9 years old.
It also helps that you're shredded. I mean, you mentioned it, but like,
yeah,
right?
You go through the phases of, now I'm bulking up to try to be big because we have Saquon, and I want to be, 5'10", 225 pounds like him, even though he's just a lifetime generational freak of nature. and then be like, fuck it, I need to take care of myself, doing all the lifts that they would do. So I would put myself through them just so I'd have a better inkling of how to coach it, doing the field work, all that, doing all the testing myself. So, I mean, it adds a lot of value and credibility when you're talking to athletes, because they don't care how strong you are, but if you're athletic and impressive, then they're like, okay, there's something to this guy.
How do you see the field evolving for any strength coach that kind of wants to do that, where you're, you've seen it started off, okay, you're the fifth coach on staff, or not the fifth, but you're one of the five, we'll talk football specifically, you're one of the five, and you do the GPS, to, okay, now you're not one of the five, there's a GPS only. Is there going to be you're a strength coach and you also do nutrition, to then potentially a nutritionist strength coach? Like, how do you see that evolving, and is that good or bad for the field?
No, I think it's good, because if you only have a specialty or knowledge in one area, that makes it difficult to have communication. As you know, when things get siloed and people just hold on to their positions, or they become very territorial, then that's when issues arise. That just means that they're very stuck in their ways. They're not going to be very open to looking at new methodologies of training. It's a lot of copy and paste. Like, this is what this team did 10, 20 years ago, and they had success. Now I want to do it too. And again, it's not like Aaron ever gave a shit. He's like, I don't want your job. I mean, he's told me multiple times, outside of being a head coach, outside of being the GM, in terms of getting the players to buy in and do what you want them to do from a job perspective, he's like, you have the hardest job in the building. I'm like, I know.
Yeah.
Hands down.
Yeah.
Hands down. So he's like, I'm going to give you autonomy.
do whatever you want, bro, because I
want to deal with that mess. And, Ronnie and them, they didn't want to deal with it either. But that's the stuff that I love. I also love training. I also love, coaching. So it was a perfect fit. But I think when you have people with knowledge in these backgrounds, that they don't necessarily have to have a dual role, but if they can do that, that becomes very valuable. And it's not just limited to, you have to do nutrition, exercise, GPS, load monitoring, all this. When you start having people that can really speak about health as a whole, like you have somebody who can do like blood biomarker analysis, you have somebody who knows about HRV, you have somebody who knows about sleep, you have somebody who knows about multiple recovery modalities, and maybe you have all the people on your staff that kind of master one thing and then they teach it to others. So you include the medical staff for things that are a little bit more medical related. You also include, your sports science staff amongst the strength and conditioning staff, amongst the nutrition staff. Now, obviously, there are going to be the big rock things you need to take charge of, but the more interconnectedness you can have, the better off that you can problem solve, because there are always going to be problems. There's always going to be something that somebody struggles with that they can't get done. And when somebody can kind of provide a little additional support, then that just makes everybody's effectiveness go up exponentially, really.
Yeah, and the reason I asked that is one of my former assistants, he had interned at UW, and one of the strength coaches was actually like acting as the dietitian, either under the dietitian or under the primary care. So that way, like, they were essentially, it's the same way that like student athletic trainers sign off on things versus for the athletic trainer, or even the AT signing off for the doctor, right? Like, is that a possibility of the way that this could continue to progress forward? Because again, at the end of the day, we're about serving the athletes and trying to give them the best knowledge. So that way, if it's an expert in it, they would know where the best place is to get the blood biomarkers, and they can filter through the things better than just, like you said, a general strength coach being like, well, we're going to go with that company, right?
Yeah. I think it just adds a ton of value. Like, I would have never gotten to the position that I did in the NFL if I didn't have the dietetics background as a dietitian, and I didn't have a master's in ex-phys and had done years of coaching from K-State to Michigan State. Because then you start seeing things really broadly. You see how overlapping all these different things are. But when you're only exposed to one of these specialties, it's only athletic training, it's only ex-phys, strength and conditioning, it's only nutrition. Like, you're very limited on your effectiveness.
What is a good path then for anybody that's listening this far to us that wants to do that? What would your recommendation be? Like, okay, I've done it. I've done these two worlds. Looking back, how can you help? We're here to help bridge the gap. So if, hey, this is what's lacking in college, this is what you should do. Like, what do you recommend to people?
Yeah, it's tough because it takes a long time. So, I did 4 years of undergrad in nutrition, then I had to do an internship, and then I had to do 2 years to get my ex-phys degree, and then I had to volunteer my time coaching to get the experience. So you're talking about 7+ years, and as you know, people just don't have the money and time to be able to do that. But I think it depends on what you like doing most and where you want your specialty. So I did the dietetics route and then went to the ex-phys route. There are some people that have done the opposite, but I think doing the opposite would be a lot harder. So the truth of the matter is I loved my ex-phys curriculum a lot more than the dietetics curriculum. I also thought it was easy as shit.
Yeah, compared to the two, like that's why I'm blown away by the amount of like that stuff is so hard to be able to know all of the different, you know, the hormones and just understanding which, you know, supplement to help with the micronutrients. Like it's that in and of itself does need its own niche, in my opinion, just because of how extensive it is and how important of a role it does play.
Yeah, and I think the tough thing is though, most colleges and places now, they'll require their nutrition staff member to be a dietitian, but I guess the kick in the dick is you don't get a lot of sports exercise exposure through the nutrition or dietetic curriculum. It's very like geared towards clinical, outpatient, food service, and production management. And so you have to check those boxes, go through those hoops to call yourself a dietitian, and then hopefully you've gained some exposure or experience, or maybe you were an athlete, so you know what the world is like. And even beyond that, you have to legitimately push off all the knowledge that you learned in school about the nutrition or the way they teach nutrition, and then realize like, okay, this is real world scenarios. This is how athletes act. This is how they need to eat. This is what they are experiencing. This is how I need to think about providing nutritional recommendations in all the different areas and aspects that they are experiencing. So that's why it becomes very difficult. It's not you can just get this certification and then you're a strength coach and then you can go on your merry way and get hired by a team, because now it's being written into, you know, NCAA rules and or CBA bylaws. You have to have somebody that's properly credentialed.
No, 100%. And that made me think about a question that I had written down prior to this, was just the fact that this coach is not in college, whether that's strength and conditioning or nutrition, talking about the simplicity of how it would be to, you know, just handle this, versus you might be a nutritionist in college that has training table, doesn't have training table, has access to supplements, doesn't have access to supplements. How do you just navigate all those different hurdles of the different, you know, training tables and fuel zones and all of those, because a lot of our listeners out there do work in those settings that do have them, and how do they best provide a service to those coaches? Because like I said, there's so many coaches out there that have never worked in it, which is why I wanted to get you on to be able to provide real actual, hey, this is what I did and this is what it should be done.
Yeah, and it's not easy, because when I, you know, finally got to a place that actually had those resources, that was at Oregon, where they had invested in their student athletes for a very long time, and the goal was, you know, yeah, I'm in charge of football, but whatever football gets, everybody else should have equal access to. So this is your maiden budget. If you need specific things for football, go talk to the DFO. He'll just clear it. You'll be okay. But these are the areas we have throughout campus, and everything was spread out. So if you've ever been to Oregon or you know how the facilities are laid out, half of them are on campus, and then the other half are away by the football stadium, by the baseball stadium, by the lacrosse and soccer stadium. So it's not like we're all in the same vicinity. So yeah, I have my own staff set up. I have to have student workers to assist that, to be able to provide the product to the necessary locations and the amounts that we need to, because I don't want my staff to spend their time doing that. I want them talking to the coaches, talking to the athletes, talking to the trainers, and problem solving and educating, as opposed to spending their entire day just fucking schlepping around product, because they didn't spend all that time in school and money in school to be some fucking, you know, Costco bitch or making smoothies all day, which I don't know how or why it came about, but that's what's being glamorized as.
That is 100% what's happening right now.
Which is unfortunate, because the logistical aspect of it, the food service aspect of it, is so time consuming. Because of, even for a sport like football, you know, they do multiple things throughout the entire day. There's 100+ kids. And you have to individualize as much as you can, whether it's smoothies, nutritional recommendations, hydration recommendations, pre, during, post training, training table, supplementation, and you not only have to do that, there are places in the locker room, in the weight room, in and around training table for that's one sport. Now you talk about some of these big schools that have 30 to 40 sports, and it's a lot of time moving product, ordering, like scheduling interns, scheduling staff members to be able to handle all that. Well, all right, do we need fueling station or nutrition station coverage? Or, hey, am I just going to stock it, like educate the athletes and make it like the onus is on them. Now you have autonomy to get what you need. You don't need somebody behind a counter passing you things. Like, grow the fuck up. And if you take advantage of it and you clean me out dry, then I'm just going to rescind privileges for a week because you took all my product, and that was meant for everybody. You took your share of what I have, and it's nothing against you. It's just I only have so much to go around. So that was how I try to think about it is, okay, what is it that they need? And I've always talked about the way I look at nutrition is it's a hierarchy of prioritization. You need to at least check the box of their macronutrient. So do we have enough energy to meet the demands of training? Now you also have goals for specific athletes. Some need to lean out, some need to put on mass. Along with that, they need to hydrate, they need electrolytes. Like, again, they need that from just a physiology standpoint. We know this. Beyond that, okay, can we start looking at like micronutrients, supplementation? Can we then start looking at where the food is coming from, quality of food? So if we don't have a big budget, our recovery drink might just be chocolate milk. If we have a big budget, fuck it, we're going to get Core Power because that shit's bomb. If we have an even bigger budget, all right, we're going to do individualized, recovery shakes based on what are the nutrition needs for this specific athlete and, what is their flavor preference. Same thing, do we just get Uncrustables? Do we make it by hand? Do we get, gourmet PB&Js made by the food service staff in-house? Whatever it is, then you can become a little bit more bougie about what you want to provide them. But again, it sucks, but sometimes if you don't have the money, the hierarchy of prioritization is we just got to check the box about giving them something. And that's what sports nutrition is to them. As long as it meets the needs of what they're expecting to do, from a macro standpoint, from a hydration standpoint, and then can you check that box? All right, we're going to the next level. Check that box. Okay, we're going to the next level.
You talked about hydration and electrolytes. Within the checking of the box, is it everybody's being lazy, or is it, hey, that's only what people can do at the lower levels? But you've talked about it before with salt and sodium just being kind of the one, people just like shoving salt down people's throats, for lack of a better term. But the fact that there's magnesium and potassium, like other electrolytes that are kind of getting neglected, and if you're just shoving a bunch of extra sodium into it, you're forgetting about the other electrolytes in the hierarchy when you're just shoving down sodium.
Yeah, I mean all of them are important. They have a role to play, but more so in terms of what our athlete's going to be losing from sweat is going to be sodium and chloride. So that's just salt, NaCl. And again, it's hard to guess how much because everybody's individual physiology, their sweat physiology is so different. You might have high volume sweaters that have low concentrations. You might have high volume sweaters that have high concentrations. Low volume, low, high. So it's hard to do very individualized recommendations because their sweat rate and concentration changes throughout the year depending on intensity of training, competition. It's the highest. What are the environmental conditions and factors? What is their nutrient status? Are they already dehydrated? Which, there's plenty of studies showing that you have at least 25 to 55 to 75% of athletes entering training, and hopefully a lesser number of that in the competition, but just dehydrated. How does that affect a lot of it? So, yeah, sodium definitely is important. Chloride, also very important. Next on the list, potassium, but not in as high amounts. And then trace amounts, you're going to think about like zinc, magnesium, and calcium for real.
That makes sense. But one of the things that we did at Towson was we would actually put them through a training session in the summertime and then run it. So that way we would spin it in a lab, then before camp, every kid would get like a, hey, you're a high, 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 low, low, high, low, low. And it would be like, hey, we had either level 3 or a level 5. And it's like, hey, drink X number of these for every pound lost. So that way we could be more individualized with it. But even at that, they were but like the likelihood, I'd be like, did you actually follow what we told you to do? You know what I mean? Like,
You know what it's like, the weigh-ins and weigh-outs during training camp. Like, there isn't a team, college or pro, that feels like, oh, we do this really well, because everybody's just running, like holding on for dear life, like running around like a chicken with their head cut off. Like the second the first practice starts, it's just that snowball effect where guys are just going to be sweating like crazy. What was it? The tight end who lost 17 pounds or whatever from TCU?
yeah, we were talking about it in the group chat though, because like again, I truly question how consistent the pre and post weight was. Like now there is a chance that it didn't happen that way, but like I've seen it. You like if let's say you had somebody like you talked about, hey, you're running around product, you're trying to get things. Okay, let's say if somebody's like, hey, just step on the scale, I got to get you on the scale, so coach blah 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 doesn't yell at you for not getting a pre-weight. Well, now you got a pre-weight that's inflated, right?
They had on all their gear and then they did their way out. Like, oh yeah, I just showered. Let me put on my t-shirt.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I forgot. Right, leaving the facility. Right, because like that happens too. Like our coaches listening to this right now, they're like, "Oh my God, that's speaking volumes to me." I mean, I've even seen it. And I'm sure our listeners out there, like, I've seen it where the athlete might not even get weighed in by a athletic trainer or a strength coach. It might just be, "Hey, honor system, you write your weight down. Now we're at least saying that we've tracked it." Right, like that. Is that actually better than not weighing in your opinion?
The only thing worse than no data is using bad data.
Right?
Honestly, like I would, and again, everybody just coaches go crazy about what are the pre and post weights? Why is so and so low? It's like, well, we don't have enough time to do it properly. In a very controlled environment, you give me, like, you put the scales wherever, like in close proximity to where most of the players are going to be running, and they're just rushing, going in and out of the locker room or wherever it is, or it's in the locker room, and they don't have time to just do it properly. Like someone's like, oh, I already put on my cleats. I can't take these off because it's going to take me 5 minutes and I'm going to be late to practice. Or I haven't eaten anything. Do I still want to get on the scale? I'm like, fuck, no, just, go grab something, go hydrate. I'd rather you do that than waste your time getting on the scale, because again, the hierarchy of prioritization is you need that sustenance substrate versus what this weigh-in is. I'll make up a weight, whatever. I don't care.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
What I was going to say is, without naming names, from the different places that you've been or any of the different people that you've, they've had you on as a consultant, we've talked about, okay, here's the bad, but like with respecting the Kierwin flat ratio, what is the best that you've seen? Like, what's the best example of, okay, you know what, this is run at a really high level for our listeners that have made it this far with us. This is how it should be done. This is how it could be done in a really, really high level and orchestrated, kind of seamlessly with training and health and the nutrition aspect of it.
I'd say, and again, I thought what we did with the Giants was pretty decent. I mean, there's still a million different things that we'd want to improve on, but we can only compare notes of what we talk to other coaches, other staff members, but then also players that, again, we got a lot of guys coming and going. So they'll be very vocal about what they like and what they didn't like. So I think that was a positive, but more so, I think what you can control a lot more is in college. I think from what I've seen from the outside, like I think LSU does a really good job.
Mm-hmm. I was going to say that,
yeah. Yeah, fucking solid. Like everything that I've seen. Again, I don't know the ins and outs of it all.
But from what I've seen, Jake and Matt's office right fucking next to each other. Like,
yep. In good collaboration with the medical staff, everybody's talking. Good collaboration, because I've actually spoken to some of their sports scientists too. I've been on a few calls with Matt and them too. Like everybody's thinking, everybody's not, resting on their laurels. Like, yeah, they won an Natty in 2019, but cool. Like, what is it that we can do to help these players now? Like, what do we need to get better at? What's working? What's not working? I think it's definitely pretty solid.
What has been your biggest aha moment in the last, you said 2019, so since 2019, maybe 2020, but the last 3 to 4 years, what has been your biggest aha moment with respect to working with clients, with within the realm of nutrition that you either did and you have since looked back and been like, man, I shouldn't have done that, or you looked back and you're like, oh, I wish I would have done that?
That's a good question. I think what I try to do with every client now is impose less of what I think they need and integrate more of what they're already doing. Because I now, as you know, I'm a father. We've got 2 kids under 3. Life is crazy. Like, if I can get a workout in a day, I've got 10 minutes. If not, I can't work out that day because everything else just snowballs. So understanding how busy people really are and trying to make things as simple as possible. If they have a flow in their day, they're already doing like, hey, this is when I wake up, this is what I'm doing, this is my opportunities. It's not for me to say, well, I think what's more ideal are going to get them better results is if they shift and did this. It's they don't have that opportunity to, because they're a parent, they work, they're a family man, member, whoever they are. Like, they just need to do this. And it might take them a lot longer or a little bit longer, but it makes more sense if they feel comfortable and they don't have to bend over backwards or feel like they're failing trying to implement something that just doesn't resonate with what.
You're essentially making sure that you're rowing upstream with the stream of the current, right? Like, you're not trying to, and I mean, that resonates with me because it's like, shoot, I'm guilty of doing the opposite, of being like, you just, you got to optimize and you got to do this and you got to do that. Like, how were you able to flip that switch? Was it when you most recently had your the birth of your child, or what was it?
I think it's just the process of going through, like, we all have success in our own health journeys doing certain things, and we feel like we have to stick to doing that. Whether, like, when I was in grad school, I got super in shape, so that's when I was coaching, like on a deck side, I was like 10% body fat. Not even trying. I was partying on the weekends, legit drinking, but just, training at a high level, going to class, teaching, doing all this stuff. And I was eating the 6 meals per day, the 6 meals per day. And I always thought, okay, when I was working at Michigan State, oh, I was shredded like 4 or 5 years ago. I got to keep doing that. I got 6 meals per day. I'm like, well, fuck, man. I'm doing exactly what I did before. I'm trying to do the same types of workouts, but all I'm doing is gaining weight. Like, oh, I didn't account for, hey, dude, you're sleeping less. You're working a lot more. You have a lot more stress on your plate because you're just trying to figure things out as this is your first big major career opportunity. So, transitioning out and doing things and getting healthier from, 2019 on, it changed to where before it was evening workouts. Now it's morning workouts. Now I'm eating 5 times a day, and now I'm eating 4 times a day. And now, right now, I eat 3 times a day. So it's recognizing, like, oh, you can have success doing any one of these different things. It's, do you know exactly what you're doing, and can you stay consistent with it? And then, being able to transition from, oh, I have to train this way. I can only train this way. I have to train at this time. Just making sure that, again, the principles are in place, but just the way the methods are created are going to be individualized for each situation. So that's when it comes to, okay, I don't need to optimize everything. And I used to be one of those people, like when I left the league and started, my business and health journey and sharing all that, I was very front on, like, oh, we got to optimize. You got to, sun in the morning, you got to do this, you got to do that, you got to ground, you got to sleep, you got to, check these 10 boxes. And then you work with clients, you realize, like, fuck, man, they don't have that opportunity to. They can't, maybe they can do 2 things, and then that's it. And then as I started getting busier and busier and busier, and, you get healthy to a point, it's like, okay, well, just to be able to maintain this, I don't need to do 10 things. I need to do just these 3 or 4 things.
That's it's interesting you say that, because that kind of is the misnomer about the 6 meals a day, breakfast, lunch, dinner, and then your multiple snacks. And then you've come out and you've been on social media talking about being able to eat 25% of protein broken down in a meal, so essentially over 4 feedings, right? Because the whole protein synthesis myth. Wadango was on the show before, and he talked about how he essentially eats all of his protein before noon, and then that way his body has more time to digest it and he can sleep better. So there is that, different strokes for different folks, the ability to have success in different ways. is that something that you like? What's your first thing that you'll then recommend to either an athlete or a client? Like, okay, you know multiple things works and you know blah blah blah, but what would be your first and then your kind of hierarchy of your flow chart, for lack of a better term?
Yeah, so I always ask, so when I work with somebody, I do an extensive assessment. It takes some people 75 minutes to fill out, it takes some people 300 minutes to fill out, but I want to know everything. But more so from a nutritional perspective, most people are trying to lean out. Like we know that's the majority of people on the planet.
Yeah.
I do have some clients that want to put on mass, and obviously when I get freed up and get a chance to just get back in the gym, I've obviously lost.
Who doesn't, right? Yeah, who doesn't?
I'll document the journey on social media, be like, hey guys, I'm a small frame Indian, just take that into consideration. Ideally, what I'd like to be is around 180 pounds, in and around the 10-12% body fat range, but fuck, I'm like 165 right now. Yeah. And it's not that I'm not eating. It's just, look, I'm not training and I need to train at a high level. That's just how my body responds. It's what I know. It's what I've tested. To the genetic stuff I know. But most people want to lose weight. So my question I always ask them is, what's more important to you? Do you just want to lose body fat and you don't care how strong you are and you don't care how much muscle mass you have? Or you want to lose weight, you want to lean out, but size and strength are important to you? So then that gets me thinking like, okay, you can have success eating before a workout. You can have success not eating before a workout. You can have success losing weight if you intermittent fast, whatever, the 12 to 8, or you can do time restricted feeding. And then I dive deeper. Like, do you have family history of heart disease, glucose control issues? We look at your data. I look at their biomarkers, which cover all of that stuff. Then it's like, okay, yeah. You need to time restrict feed early in the day because we already know that has better implications for glucose control, lipid control, all of that. So no, don't stop fasting from 12 to 8. Like I need you to go 10 to 6 and I need you to eat 33% of your protein calories before noon. And then we'll break it up. How many calories do you need? How much protein do you need? That's going to dictate generally how many feedings. I have some clients that, they try to hit 275 grams a day, which is a lot. I have some clients that are 250 pounds or 275 pounds or 290 pounds. So I'm like, yeah, can you do that in 3 feeds? No. Okay, we've got to do it in 4. Ideally, I'd like them to do it in 3, but I'll ask them that. Like, do you want to try? Can you do it? If they say, no, I can't do it, cool. They'll say, I'm going to try. They try it. They're like, I just can't. That's fine. Like, eating 12 ounces of meat in a meal can be difficult for a lot of people. Yeah. Regardless of they're not going to eat ribeye steaks every day.
Yeah. No.
One, it's
gout in the finances of it, right? Like that's not sustainable.
So again, that flow is I want to learn as much as I can, use their current habits and their health status, and then what do we know about what's published, what makes sense, and how do we implement this? Should they eat before they train? When are they training? How long are they training for? Oh, I train in the morning. Do you normally eat before you lift? No. Are you trying to lose weight? Yeah. Do you care about strength? No. I'm like, okay, you're going to do fasted training, but the second your training session's done, I'm like, I need you to eat this.
It's really smart. One of the last questions I have for you before I let you, continue about being the dad life. Injured athlete nutrition, because, a lot of our members and a lot of our listeners out there work with athletes in college or private sector or high school. What is kind of your ground level, let's say it's not an acute injury, but it's like, hey, they're going to be out for a while. It's a chronic, they're going to have surgery. What are you typically recommending to, again, 10,000 foot view, to anybody that is working with an athlete and they have a surgery and they know they're going to not be as active?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to happen. It's going to keep happening. So understanding first what injury they have and what are the general physical changes that happen in the time frame of the prognosis. I think that's important. Knowing if they are going to go under the knife or have surgery, when that's happening, are they traveling somewhere? Do they have family members with them? Because I think a lot of times these things get lost in translation where, and this has happened with, one of the teams that I consult with, an athlete had, an ACL, had to go get it repaired in California. I didn't know exactly when the time frame for that was, but then got a call from her. She's like, hey, I'm in the hotel room. I'm with my mom. Like, what do I do? I was like, fuck. I would have prepared her better for that. Like, hey, I need you to just, stick with this surgery. I need you to make sure that you get a good meal the night before. Make sure you get in this drink, before, because there are studies that show better outcomes of controlling blood glucose levels, just overall athlete patient well-being, consuming something. But a lot of doctors will have that as a contraindicative. They want their athletes coming in fasted, and I'm like, that's just there's research that debunks that. So I'm always a big fan of that. The second is knowing that any injury is going to increase energy expenditure because you have a stress factor involved. Your activity factor is down, but now you have the body that's trying to repair itself. So you have increased needs for protein, for certain micronutrients that are involved in wound healing and repair. While knowing that if an athlete does get injured, they're going to be somewhat depressed, anxious, their appetite's going to go out the window. What they think is, well, I'm not training, I don't want to eat because I don't want to get fat. Mm-hmm. They're not thinking, okay, I have higher calorie needs because of the injury, but I'm decreased calorie needs because of my activity level, so it's kind of like a little bit of a balance. I need to eat more protein consistently because ideally you'd want to just maintain as much muscle mass as possible, as opposed to putting on fat, as opposed to losing a lot of muscle mass, which happens to a lot of athletes, which if they start losing weight, that's just going to put them behind the eight ball, because again, you have these benchmarks throughout rehab and return to play in terms of strength and movement and all that. If they're losing muscle mass, they're not going to be able to generate the same amount of force and power and all that. So it's going to prolong return to play even longer. And simple nutritional interventions can help mitigate some of that. It just acutely, even after a mobilization happens, after about 24 hours, like you can get significant decreases in muscle protein synthesis within 24 to 36 hours. And you can mitigate some of it, high protein, creatine. You can't completely eliminate it, but there are things that you can do to help them out. And then there are different stages in recovery. So initially you have, that inflammatory stage. That's when you don't want to overload them with anti-inflammatory type foods and supplements because, hey, let the body heal within the first 24 to 48 hours. Most doctors can kind of give you that general guidelines depending on how severe the injury was and how intense was the surgery. But once that starts happening, they go over to that stage. Then you go to whatever, the remodeling, however people like to call it. Everybody has their different time frames for, hey, it's day 3 to day 8 or 3 to day 11. Like, nobody fucking knows any of this shit. I'd say, hey, inflammatory stage, we're just going to go straight with food, creatine, maybe some vitamin D. And then, when the doc gives us the clear, I'm like, all right, now I'm throwing everything in the kitchen sink at you because now we want to mitigate too much inflammation. And that's when they want to at least eat, keep the protein level high, know that they have just gone through surgery, so that is an additional stress factor that you want to increase for a little bit of time before the body starts repairing itself, wound healing happens. Then you bring it back down to, they just should be eating at maintenance for whatever that gets calculated. So yeah, supplements are a part of that because we know that a lot of athletes just can't eat very well. They might be on a lot of medication, so they're backed up. They might not have much of an appetite. So,
Speaking of the medication, do you remember back when, Poliquin, when and I don't know if they still were. I mean, Poliquin has since passed, so rest his soul. Yeah. But everybody was taking hydrochloric acid. I feel like it was back in 2011 and did you remember what do you know what I'm talking about? Because they were taking hydrochloric acid pills to help them digest their food because the whole nomer was there wasn't enough hydrochloric acid in your stomach, so take some of it to help you digest your food.
I think I know what you're talking about.
I'm not trying to throw dirt on anyone's grave. No. I'm just talking about the notion of adding hydrochloric acid to your stomach to help you digest it, because you talked about gut health in the beginning.
Taking digestive enzymes, because those are independent, those are enzyme versus actual acid. But to me, it's just taking things a little bit too far. Look, if your systems are healthy and you chew your food properly, and you're not eating things that provide you with discomfort, or you have an allergy or an aversion, you will digest it. You don't have issues with leaky gut or intestine permeability, then you don't have to take additional acid. it's not anything that's over the top. Generally, when people have issues with low stomach acidity, they just need a lot more B vitamins, like definitely 1 and 2 for sure. And/or I've had some athletes take diluted apple cider vinegar with some of those too. People think, oh, you need like a PPI or an antacid to help with GERD and this and that. I'm like, GERD is lack of acid. When you take something that cuts down acid, the body's going to try to make more acid, and that's where reflux happens. That's where they get these issues. It's hilarious.
Anybody that has made it this far with us, you clearly can tell that the man is a nutritional expert. That's why he presented in Fundamentals. If you want to check out Fundamentals Level 2, go ahead and you will find it in the link below. You will also find all of his stuff down below. But Tiki, go ahead and remind the people where they can follow you on social or any of your stuff that you want them to direct them to and follow you on your path.
Yeah, whatever social media platform you prefer, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram. My handle's at Pratik Patel. Just try to post daily. Obviously, I'm transitioning some stuff with the business, so I think going to be niching down even a little bit more. So be on the lookout for that, to where I'm excited about it. I think it's something that's been coming for a while, and I think it's going to add a lot of value to a specific population, so I'm excited to roll that out. Still going to be a little bit assholey, throwing out jokes here left and right, but just trying to be as informational as possible for people in the real world. Like, athletes can take the information, coaches can. It's not super biohacky. I know a lot of these accounts get really popular, like, hey, take these 8 supplements for one reason. It's like, people don't have time to do that. And I'm healthy and I don't even take any of those, and I have shitty Indian genetics. Like, you don't need to do that stuff.
You heard it from the man himself. Thank you very much, brother. Have a good rest of the day.
Thanks, man.
Congratulations on making it to the end of the video. Why don't you celebrate by watching more videos just like it? You can also help us on our quest to placate the algorithm gods by liking, sharing, subscribing, and commenting. Thank you.